Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.
And you're very welcome to this week's edition of Over the Line, your GAA podcast extra here on Galway Bay FM. And in typical championship fashion, of course, we said that it was Sean and Ollie, but Ollie has failed a fitness test, and we're delighted to be joined by Darren Kelly, who comes in to start. And in typical championship fashion, of course, that wasn't named to the media beforehand, but here you are, better known as Daz. Darren, you're very welcome, and we're delighted to have you on board.
Sean, thank you very much. At the risk of going into another code as well, it is transfer deadline day, so instead of 100 million move,
so you're leaving Ballinasloe and going to where?
100 shilling move from Ballinasloe here to Galway Bay FM today. Pleasure to be here.
Not at all. Listen, we're also delighted to be joined by Cyril Farrell, who was joining us this afternoon as well. And I suppose, listen, the sunshine is here. We're delighted with that. But I suppose let's talk with one of the biggest moves that has happened in the last few weeks. Last week we had him on here, Darren, Micheal Donoghue, or 2 weeks ago, looking forward to the next round of the hurling matches here in Galway. But since then he's become the new Dublin manager, and it's caused a little bit of debate.
Yeah, he kept that very quiet, didn't
he? He
was on here, he was in the commentary box with yourself one day, which it's announced, and I'm waiting to see him last week. But no, listen, first things first, my own feeling on it. Look, there's so much untapped potential in Dublin, and we know that the issue with the dual players and with the football as well, which makes life very, very difficult. But Micheal obviously senses something. You know, he's brought Franny forward and Larkin with him as well. Like, you know, there's serious business up there. Dublin, they pull out some big results, but then I suppose flattered to deceive the following game. You know, some people have judged Mahey Kinney's been very, very harshly, I feel myself, but this is star power going to Dublin there now, and it's up to them to stand up. And if they do, they'll ask some questions, definitely, Sean.
Cyril, this management bug, it's obviously a bug, and I got the impression, and look, you've been with us as well for the last while, but I got the impression that since Christmas it was like as if Micheal was kind of dying to get back involved again, wasn't he?
Yeah, I gathered early on. I'm talking about a year like when he was doing even stayed during the COVID times there, Sean. Like, you know, he's a very young man, and I know circumstances can change the family and that and business, but like, he has so much to offer. You could sense he was going to go back in summer. Now, I was hoping down the road to be back into Galway again. That's what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking of, say, other teams, but like he knows his management team very well, and he knows where he's going. And Dublin might sound far away, but in the modern world, like with the new road structures, and like, sure, if the train in Luke and Sarsfield, Sean, they'll be there within an hour and a half. Like, you know, it isn't as far away as it's. But look, it's exciting times in Leinster, because with Brian Cody retiring, everyone is more or less on the same page. Like, you have 5 or 6 teams, but really you have, say, Kilkenny, Wexford, Dublin and Galway. And whichever they makes a move, there's no Limerick yet established in Leinster. Like, you have the 4 teams in Munster plus Limerick. But whoever makes a move in Leinster could become the kingpins of Leinster for a good while. And like, you can bet your bottom dollar he sees a great opportunity for that. Like,
certainly does. And I suppose our other guest today is Frank Roche from the Irish Independent. We're delighted to have Frank Roche with us. And Frank, you have a unique insight into the Dublin scene, obviously. And the initial reaction, Frank, because I think we were all taken a bit by surprise, weren't we?
Very much so. In a way, this is typical John Costello and how he operates. He's very good at keeping his cards close to his chest, and suddenly a message will pop up on the Dublin Twitter account or somewhere like that on the county board website and say, we'd like to confirm, you know, manager A is joining on a 3-year term, and here is his backroom team. And that's exactly what happened here. There had been virtually no talk about Micheal Donoghue being a potential candidate in the race to succeed Matty Kenny. I mean, in a way, you had heard several of the usual suspects, whether there was anything to it or not. Davy Fitz's name was mentioned, and that obviously went cold very quickly when he was reappointed in Waterford. Eddie Brennan's name was mentioned in dispatches. There was even talk that Pat Gilroy's work scenario may have changed, and that he could be poised for a second coming in charge of the Dublin Hurlers after spending just 1 year in charge in 2018. So in that context, it definitely was a surprise. I think it's fascinating when you look at the backroom team that he has, one of the connections there, because Shane O'Brien has come in not just as a selector, but as Dublin's new under-20 manager. And Shane previously was in charge of the Westmeath seniors, and during that spell, he brought Noel Larkin on board into his management team. So obviously there was a potential link to Donoghue, and now we see that Micheal is in there with Franny Ford and Noel Larkin. Like, that was his winning triumvirate with Galway in 2017, and Shane O'Brien is kind of the local element to that mix.
Frank, just taking that as well, and based on the names you've mentioned there as well, and of course we read them in the papers too, be linked with the Dublin job and many more as well. What's been the reaction in Dublin to the appointment of Micheal Donoghue?
I think very much positive. I mean, I don't think people were expecting that Dublin were necessarily going to be able to entice a recent All-Ireland winning senior manager to take charge of the team. I mean, without a shadow of doubt, of the last couple of years, the so-called Dublin hurling revolution had not just stalled, but it had kind of gone slightly into reverse. They were still a competitive team. They were still capable on their day of taking out Galway, for example. They have a great record of beating Galway in championship over the last decade and more. But there was very little consistency to what they were about. They invariably fell short on the biggest days. Whenever they faced Kilkenny in league or championship especially in the last few years, they got something of a lesson. And the team, they had issues in their full forward line. The team had become overly reliant, I would say, on Donald Burke for scores. And it looked like kind of, after 4 years, it had reached the end of the road under Matty, for all the brilliant work he did with Coola, winning back-to-back All-Ireland titles, in the capital. And flickers of real promise with Dublin. I think the setup did need a change, but I don't think they expected to get someone who had won an All-Ireland so recently as Micheal.
And is there nearly a kind of a marketing element to this, in the sense that, I mean, we saw, and I'm going to throw the question, I mean, Owen O'Donnell, it looks a surprising move that the captain of the hurling team would throw his lot in with the football team, but is that on a bigger scale? Is football, given the success in recent times, the more sexy game at the minute? So is trying to entice, and I know we spoke about, say, the Lee Gannons and these guys who were probably dual players anyway, but is trying to entice these guys a marketing project almost within Micheal Donoghue's remit, as much as getting Dublin hurling back on the big stage?
Well, I think that will be part of it, and it'll be a case of watch this space in the next few months to see where Owen O'Donnell ends up. And I mean, if he throws his lot in full time with the footballers in the new season, that's going to be a hammer blow to Dublin, and very much an early setback for Micheal. But I mean, I don't know if too many of us can read that at the moment. There's real uncertainty over how that will pan out. And I would imagine maybe the decision itself isn't made yet either. But there's a lot to be going on with Micheal has when he gets in, working with this Dublin setup. I mean, they over the last few years they have some really, really top players, and probably none better than O'Donnell, who's been one of the game's standout fullbacks over the last 5 years. But they definitely have issues in the scoring department. I mean, even this morning, just almost to try to confirm it in my own head, to see at what level they had become dependent on Donald Burke. I mean, in this year's championship, the 5 Leinster group matches, Dublin scored just 1 goal and 109 points, and Donald Burke scored 59 points, 20 of those from play. I mean, you work out the match there, that's nearly 53% of Dublin scores. And in the really big matches, and we're talking about Kilkenny, I mean, that was the one where you could argue the rot set in this year. 4th round of the championship, they'd won their first 3 matches, as you'd expect, against Laois and Westmeath. The Wexford one was obviously one of those key matches. But once they got the win in Wexford Park, I think they're set to finish in the top 3. They're going to be in the All-Ireland series come what may. But, I mean, they got a real lesson against Kilkenny that day. I mean, they lost by 17 points, were steamrolled in the second half. 2 of their full forward line were taken off. One of those before half time. Those two players, Ed Mellett and Ronan Hayes, didn't score from play. So they've had a big issue in the scoring department and also in consistency. And their area straight away that Micheal is going to have to address.
And Cyril, what would be the expectation in Dublin, or I suppose where is Dublin's ceiling at? I suppose is the question. They were in the Leinster final 2 years ago, defeated Galway. Will success be, say, win a Leinster title, maybe reach an All Ireland semi-final? Is that where the bar would be set, do you think?
I'd say so. I'd say the Dublin supporters would be very happy if they could win a Leinster title and get into an All Ireland semi-final. After that, anything can happen. But like as Frank alluded to there, like the consistency. But like, even say referring to like kind of only one or two forwards scoring, you could say the same about a lot of teams. Like the consistency. Even our own County Galway, we haven't been consistent. On days it can be very good, and other days they're not good. But like it's exciting times for Dublin because like they have. Their club structure is getting stronger. Like the teams in it are getting stronger and stronger. Fine young hurlers under 20 as well. So I'd say like you try to get a few new fellas, especially I suppose up front. And it is important that they hold on to Owen O'Donnell. But I saw Cian O'Callaghan there playing full back lately for Coolan. He was very, very effective as well. You had both of them on the team, I know, but he's already standing full back. But like Dublin, Micheal will want Owen O'Donnell back because he's probably one of the best backs in the country over the last few years by a mile. Like, and there isn't that much to change. Matty Kinney got a lot out of them. The thing is, has Matty Kinney taken everything out? That's the big question. Is there much left in the tank in a lot of these fellas? But like a new voice can always bring changes, and he's a lovely set up with him. And like like they'll know the scene inside out. These guys are good, and as Frank alluded to, they have won All Ireland titles and Leinster titles. So like they'll be aiming high, but definitely Leinster title would be straight away in their aim.
Frank, just going back to yourself there, just touching on all that too and talking about holding on players. And look, I think it's safe to say many people in the country believe that Conor O'Callaghan is arguably one of the best hurler in the country, and he's not playing football. What's the relationship like between the hurling and the football folk in Dublin? Like, are these players just making the decision because football is just sexier, as Sean said there? The All-Irelands have been coming in the door recently. They feel the Holy Grail is there. Or is there pressure being put on some promising hurlers to throw your lot in with the football? And could that possibly be something to do with what's going on with Owen O'Donnell at the moment?
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I mean, obviously, Dessie Farrell would have been, making inquiries, discreet inquiries in the background probably for a while in relation to that. But I don't think it's a case that, that the Dublin County Board doesn't care about hurling anything but. I mean, it's the law of the jungle. Dublin football is always going to be, a sexier product than the hurling. I mean, they've lost a series of really, potentially very good hurlers of the last 10 years. You talk about Cormac Costello, Kieran Kilkenny, Conor O'Callaghan. If they had decided they wanted to be Dublin hurlers rather than Dublin footballers, Dublin may have won more than the 2013 Leinster title. But that's just the nature of it. I mean, Conal Keaney going back to the Dublin hurlers in 2011 is one of the few examples of hurling benefiting from a player going in the opposite direction.
How much, Frank, can Micheal Donoghue influence that?
I'm sure he can definitely have a say. I mean, I suppose there are some parallels to be drawn between Anthony Daly coming in to Dublin in 2009 and Micheal. I mean, Anthony hadn't won an All-Ireland as Clare manager, but he had captained Clare to 2 All-Ireland titles. He was a hugely charismatic personality, different personality than Micheal Donoghue, in fairness. But when he came in, Dublin had been meandering along for years, threatening to get in, approach the top tier, but never really getting that close. And Daly kind of definitely changed the mindset, even the PR element around the Dublin hurlers. And it didn't come straight away. I mean, they got to a Leinster final in 2009. They had the disaster against Antrim in 2010. But when he got Keaney back in 2011, that wasn't the only factor, but it was a huge factor in transforming Dublin from nearly men into genuine contenders. And I mean, in 2011, they won the National League. They hammered Kilkenny in the final. and they went through the back door and ended up in an All-Ireland semi-final and pushed Tipperary relatively close that year. So, looking at the makeup of the Dublin panel, it's a big ask to see something like that happening that quickly with Dublin now. But you're right, like the Leinster landscape, especially with Brian Cody gone, is not quite what it was. I mean, you're looking at 4 teams who are going to be contending for 3 places in the All-Ireland series next year, and Dublin were one of them.
I suppose, sir, the other thing that's interesting is, and Frank has referenced Shane O'Brien in as the under-20 manager and part of the senior management. So straight away there seems to be a focus on development and on linkage between the two of them, and that's something that we often talk about here in Galway in terms of linkaging from your academy system upwards to get guys in. So by O'Brien's involvement, and as already been referenced by Frank, he had Nolan Larkin involved with him for a while in the Westmeath job. That linkage could be crucial, couldn't it, for this new management?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a great appointment myself, because Shane would know. He'd have done a lot of work with the kind of the formation of the underage panels, and he'll know the setup well. We did it for a good few years in Galway, my own time here. We had the linkage with the under-21s and we went quite well. We kind of won a good few under-21s, kind of went under the radar, but we did win them, and it was with close cooperation with the senior team, because we were all working together. That's what you need, really, especially for a team to make a breakthrough. I think they're going the right way about it, and I can see them being very dangerous next year, even in the first year, because the boys bring a lot of experience. Shane will know the Dublin scene well. Okay, they'll lead them all hurling, but going back to Frank's point there, if a lad doesn't commit to the hurling with me all, and when they get into work, that will be it. Whoever commits will commit, and whoever doesn't, he won't be upsetting the panel. If a lad is humming and hawing, he'll have them either in or out. That's the way it will be, no on him.
And just actually on that, I'll come in if that's all right. Shane O'Brien earlier this year was working with, you'd call it an extended panel or development panel in cooperation with Matty Kenny. So Shane had been brought in to work with the next tier of players, who might be, in line to make a breakthrough at senior squad level in the next year or two. So that link was already established, and they can now build on that again.
A few quick fire ones. The Laois job, Frank, is still up for grabs. There's a bit of talk here in Galway that Jeff Linsky could be in the hat there. I think was Willie Maher mentioned this week as well. Anton, on that?
I haven't heard actually anything. In fairness, now you've got me on the hop there, but
yeah,
it's a problem.
We tend to do that here on this program.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's not as sexy a job as it was a couple of years ago. I mean, we're going back to only 2019 when Laois shocked a Dublin team that had previously shocked a Micheal Donoghue managed Galway team.
Yes.
And Laois were in an All-Ireland quarter final and played very, they'd won the McDonagh Cup that year, were very competitive for long spells of that quarter final against Tipperary. But a year later, Eddie Brennan was gone. The second coming of Cheddar Plunkett didn't work out really, and I mean, you could see, it was actually very curious, the Laois results in the Leinster round robin this year. Their first game was against Dublin and they only lost by 2 points. And in fairness, maybe round one is often when an underdog might kind of, be as competitive as they can be in that scenario. But they lost their next 4 fixtures by 90 points. I mean, so there are big issues to address there for whoever gets that job. And they won't be in the Leinster Championship next year, of course, which, might be to their benefit.
Finally, and we just throw this question, as a journalist, the split season, Frank, there's a lot of people for it, there's a lot of people against it, a lot of people are delighted that the club is getting the day in the sun. Thankfully, the sun is shining in the last few weeks, but from a marketing point of view, do you think the GAA has lost a trick in that we're gone so early from the inter-county scene with that July dates for All-Ireland finals now? Are we losing a little bit of marketing space?
Oh, that goes without question. I mean, we're into the realms of the pros and cons of the split season. And I mean, from a from a PR perspective, they cannot be good news for the GAA. I mean, you're basically from a week before the end of July, the senior championship season was over. You've all of August into September is now a fallow period in terms of blanket publicity for the GAA in papers, websites, TV, and radio. Now that was already moving. I mean, the All Ireland finals have come back to August several years ago before COVID. But something had to give, and it's intriguing actually if you talk to inter-county players who are back playing with the clubs now. You will struggle to find too many of them who are upset. They think this is a godsend, and you can understand why they would, because they were going from one treadmill which was running in several cases well into in September, straight into another one, and playing club championship matches and finals into November and later. So I mean that's changing. They have the potential at least for a proper off season.
Sean, just coming in there, I love the split season, but I'd love to have it the other way around, because like when you look at it closely, what Frank is saying is true. Like the county lads love it, but half of them are hopping on planes and gone, and they're not with the clubs at all. They will if they get into a final. If you ran it the other way around, you'd have the All Ireland series starting, say, at the end of July. But you look at it closely. Now we're going into the winter once again. There'll be light. Every club will be using lights because they'll be all involved. The pitch will start cutting up. Whereas if there's a county, you'll be only using one set of lights and only one venue. I think it would work perfect if they could maybe drop it, do it other, reverse it around. And that way, you see, when the club would be over, the county lads wouldn't be hopping off because they'd be going playing with the county. They'd want to play with the county. Whereas it's now like you can't blame a young fella if he's good enough to get asked out to American Air and a few $100 or whatever there for the few weeks. They're gone. But like it's having a big effect, especially on rural clubs. Now they might be back if they get good enough to get into a semi-final, final, but they're not around. A lot of them aren't around when you really need them. I think if they look to, and definitely for the PR thing, the papers are saturated with everything except GAA now because it's not on. It's okay, the club thing, but that will make the back pages. As Frank says, like it's a complete disaster that way. But it's a great system. I think if you could just work it the other way around, and it's probably here to stay. That split season is anyway, whichever way they're going to move it around.
If I can jump in there, I can even throw a third option in there. Now, I'd be in favour of the split season. And the reality is this is what the players want, as Frank touched on as well. But just because of the split season, lads, and both of you give your thoughts on this, why does it have to be January to December? I think one thing we're learning this year is no inter-county in August was an own goal, because half the club players, I'm exaggerating a little bit now, but a lot of club players are away, and even here in Galway ourselves, and Frank, you've probably seen it in Dublin too, clubs are missing key players for the first 2 or 3 rounds. They could well be out of their championships beforehand, where you take there a couple of years ago when Conor Finn won the All-Ireland in January before the pandemic. That didn't bother Conor Finn, didn't bother Kilkerran Clonberne ladies this year winning their All-Ireland in January too. And I don't think for clubs to get lucky enough, like personally I think the All-Ireland Club final should go back to St. Patrick's Day anyway. But if it's to be February to January or March to February, could that system not still work as well, where we still get the inter-county action during the summer, but the club players are ready to go from the start of September and thunder into their championships?
Well, I think what you might find, and it probably won't happen straight away next year, but in a couple of years' time, you'll find that the All-Ireland, I'd say the All-Ireland series may go back a fortnight, and you might have the football final, a week into August, or maybe even a week later, because you've got to remember next year, you're going to have round-robin matches in the Sam Maguire and the Tailteann Cup. I don't have the figures in front of me, but there's a huge wedge of extra matches to be played next year between, say, the end of January in the league and the end of July. And it's going to be absolutely frenetic, and fitting all these fixtures in. Obviously, they have the plan, they have the dates, but it's going to be relentless. And it may come across as a little bit too much like overkill, I'd say. So I'd say in time it may settle, and you may go back a week or two. Beyond that, I'm not too sure. I mean, even before we had the concept of the split season, and in a way it was always there. But I remember a few years ago, we were interviewing Joe Canning somewhere up in Dublin, and Galway had just been knocked out of the championship. I'm not even sure if it was that time they lost to Dublin, but around about then. And Portumna weren't going to be playing their first championship match until I think the middle of August. 8 or 9 weeks beyond this. And in a way, I think county boards were nearly facilitating the transatlantic traffic over to America, because they knew so many players were going away. So you're probably always going to have difficulties trying to come up with the ideal solution in the GAA, because there are just so many layers to it.
Frank, I'm delighted we meandered onto that split season, but it really is a huge area, and I think that I think in fairness we have to give this first year, we'll say post-COVID, to the degree that it is, a chance to bed in to see what it will look like by the end of it. But I think there's a huge debate here to be had when the club championships begin to end this season, because I think everyone is looking at the whole different scenario. September was still ingrained in people's heads, but no matter how we dress it up for All Ireland finals, that's totally gone now. But look, we'll give it a chance. Frank Roche of the Irish Independent, thanks for joining us today on the Over the Line podcast. Delighted to get your thoughts, and we look forward to following your work with Micheal Donoghue as the year progresses.
Okay, thanks, Sean and Darren.
You're Frank.
Okay, best of luck.
Cyril, I suppose this week it's round 3 of the club championship. Myself and Darren were just chatting here earlier that it's probably the beginning of the moving 2 rounds, isn't it? It's rounds 3 and 4. If we look at we look at them kind of in groups, if you don't mind, in the Senior A. 3 games this weekend in Group 1. St Thomas's trailblazing, as we would expect, taking on Castlegar. Clymer Daly against Turlockmore, which is now becoming a key game in its own right. And Clarenbridge against Sarsfields, which is another key game. This group, the 2 Senior A groups, are very difficult, as we know. But we're going to learn a lot more by the end of this round, aren't we?
Yeah, well, as you say, once the third round is over, there's great hurling, Sean. The standards have been very, very good, and some great matches. But once the third round is over, a lot of teams are going to know where they stand, but I suppose everyone is nearly still in it. There's still a lot to play for. But going to the first match there, you talked about St Thomas's, and these boys have really kind of have set the trend already. They're playing Castlegar in Pearse Stadium now. The first day out, I saw Thomas's playing against Sarsfields, and it was a brilliant game, and they played very, very well. Didn't seem to play as well the next day. Castlegar weren't good the first day against Turlockmore, but played much better against Sarsfields. Remember, Sean, we were together a few years ago inside the stadium, and put up a mighty show against Thomas. Yeah. Now, I'd expect them to put up a good show, but you'd have to say that Thomas's are still the standard bearer. They're very good at filling where you think the weaknesses are, like Shane Cooney's gone for a while, but they don't seem to be missing anyone. They're a very, very good team. Because you don't win a few cups in a row, 4 or 5 cups in a row without doing that, without being good. They'll be hot favourites to win in Pearse Stadium against Castlegar. But knowing Castle, especially after the last day, they put up a dogfight. They have to, because they've been beaten twice. Beaten 3 times, it's puts real pressure on. But I still expect Thomas to come through there.
Clymer Daly, Turlock, and Clarenbridge, Sarsfields then.
Well, Clymer Daly played quite well, last time. But Turlock, after the result that they got against Castlegar, it wasn't that they won, but the manner that they won, made me think they're really on a run now. They got well beat themselves in by Clarenbridge. But you'd expect Turlockmore to get back on the winning trail again. Clymer Daly played well both days until the last 7 or 8 minutes, and didn't seem to fade. If they can last it for the 60 minutes, they'll be hard to play against. But you'd still expect Turlockmore to win that one.
Clarenbridge and Sarsfields, Darren, has the looks of a real game here, because Sarsfields have been sending out good vibes in the 2 games. Clarenbridge backing up last year's county final appearance with 2 wins of their own. Yeah,
Clarenbridge look like they just belong. They've settled into Senior A, and of course it's easy to forget they were a Senior B team. They made the county final last year, but they've got the job done so far, and they're up to 2 wins against Clymer Daly and against Turlockmore, reporting no injury concerns as well. It's a bit important game for both teams. Obviously, if Clarenbridge win, that's effective them through to the preliminary quarterfinals at the very, very least. For Sarsfields, the question is, can they back up the performance against St Thomas's? As Cyril mentioned, Castlegar were very, very close to them the last day as well. They needed a late goal to put a bit of distance between them. And Sarsfields are coming in with a few injury concerns as well into the match too, which will put the pressure on them. Now, they're not going to be out of the championship if they lose the game, but of course, you get down to the final 2 games with only 2 points in the bank. You have to be concerned as well. And for Aidan Donoghue Donoghue and his team, they look at this as another opportunity to test themselves as well, ideally get a result. But Clarenbridge want to maintain that habit too as well. Like, look, St Thomas's and Clarenbridge are playing like the top two teams in the county at the moment, based on what we've seen in the opening 2 rounds as well. I don't expect too much to change out of that. I'll be very, very interested though to see how Clymer Daly approach that Turlockmore match. While I do agree with Cyril that I'd fancy Turlockmore to get the job done, they have a few injury concerns as well. Barry McDonough might be back. You're wondering about Kevin Hussey and Fergal Moore as well. Clymer Daly don't, and they look at it kind of going, they should be doing better. Like, you know what I mean? There's no relegation this year. That pressure is off on those senior A teams. But that's a game in Pearse Stadium. I'm looking forward to Sunday as well, Sean.
Group 2, and I suppose like even the last stage, and we see like there's so many things that we could stay on here for 3 hours. Like Cashel playing Ushie and Connolly, for instance, at centre back. As you say, Clarenbridge, Ian O'Brien's a big loss to them. I think Turlock I think they named 8 guys that played in last year's championship that didn't play against Clarenbridge, right? Some of them gone away for a while or whatever. Now, sir, we obviously can't ask you about who's going to win between Tommy Larkins and Kilkenarn because you're going to be on the sideline. But this management of the new structure as well, you're playing every 2 weeks. What's that like on grassroots level in terms of, is it great that the games are coming thick and fast? But what I am seeing is clubs are getting injuries, and I've also seen a lot of younger lads getting their chance now in the championship this season. Is that because of necessity?
Well, I'd say so, but like it's great to see because you are getting like every team is getting 5 games in the group, which is fantastic, and just 2 to 3 weeks. Well, nearly 2 weeks every 2 weeks now. The big thing is the injuries, of course, and like if you get a bad hamstring, Sean, for example, and they'll grade them 1, 2, 3, 4. If you get a bad one, you're probably gone for all the games or very near it. Even say a dead leg, you're gone for 2 or 3 games. So if it happens to the wrong, like everyone has so many players, but like they all have top players, and you know you have your kind of leaders and the next to follow up line. Like you can't afford to do without them. But an interesting thing in the match as well, like, is the movement of players. I thought the most interesting movement so far was in Clarenbridge, where they just pushed TJ Brennan up centre forward rather than centre back. Now he's effective in both places, but they have so many players that he didn't seem to be any loss to the backs, and he was a big plus up front, you know, like, and that's what's happening. Now the young lads are getting chances. Like Loughrea have a very, very young team. Like some of the Turlockmore lads are away in America, but it didn't seem to affect their team. Sarsfields have a lot of very good young players coming through. That's what's happening. And like even for Henry Sheffler going around, I'd say he must be scratching his head because there's lads popping up everywhere and everyone's saying, where's the talent? There's plenty of talent, but there are new names, you see, and that's, you know, people have been to wonder. I saw Carter last against ourselves, like, you know, they call him Pigeon, like, you know, but like this guy, you know, Helbert, like he has skill to burn. He reminds me a bit of Tom Hannon coming late and like he's around for a while, but sure, maybe now is the time for him. This guy would be at home in Thurles or above in Croke Park because he has the skill level. There's some fast, and your own club, Sean Loft has seen him twice now, say centre forward, once in the league and once in championship, and again has seemed to be got a new lease of life and playing very, very well. These are good hurlers and they'd hold their own anywhere. So, and you know, there will be new names in the Galway set up, and I think Henry needs it. The biggest problem they have is to pick, like they're all beginning to pop all over the place. Soppertumna, like, and again, some lovely young hurlers, and again, they you know, they're kind of coming again. Okay, Joe is still leading them, and like, just imagine Joe Cannon play saying and B hurling. Who's there to mark him? So you wouldn't be able to mark him if you're playing senior hurling and inter-county and clubs. So like, it shows you the standard that's there. I just think the standard is very, very high, and the hurling is good. And I must say, like, to me anyway, the hurling has improved a ton, and it's gone very clean. The refs are strict, and it's the way it should be played.
Sir, can I just jump in at that point for a moment before we go back to the games? Because you mentioned about a lot of new players there, and Henry Shefflin will be looking around. Even yourself, especially the second time you came back as Galway manager in the 80s, and you built a team around the under-21 and minor wins in 1983. Henry's brought an awful lot of players into the Galway setup this year. We've seen 1 or 2 step up as well. Like, does he need to bring more in this year, do you feel, or is it the time now to settle this panel down, because we weren't that far away when you take all the results into account this year?
Yeah, we're not far away, and I see a great chance. I was just saying there when Frank was on, like, you look at it, Kilkenny shouldn't be the same without Cody for a while. There's a chance for Galway or someone like Galway. Galway could now become the powerhouse in Leinster if they move ahead and start winning Leinster titles, because we would have the backup talent to do it. We'd have lads that maybe anyone ever heard of, but they'd hold their own. You know what I mean? In any company. And I think Henry, he has, as you say, a few lads in there that have been kind of training with the panel and on the extended panel and now moving up, and they could move in this year. And hopefully what I would love to see is a fella. You see, most of the lads now, Darren, are coming through the systems, the development squads. I would love to see a fella come and say out of the blue, maybe from a junior club or intermediate club that no one kind of knows about. Like, you know, there's hidden jewels around the place. It's just a matter of finding them. I believe that they will find them this year, because they're probably looking harder to realise after last year that they were very, very near. Like, when all was said and done, like, we had Limerick at full stretch coming down the home stretch, you know. And even the lads that played brilliant for Limerick in the All-Ireland final, like, they were taken off against Galway. So, like, that shows you the talent that's there. It's just a matter of getting a few little things right. And I'm delighted that Henry stayed on, because I think it would have been a terrible blow for us if he left. It'd be the wrong time for us, and maybe for him as well. We kind of need him at the helm now, just to push it. It's only just to push a small bit. Like, when you look at the new managers going into the other places, even Micheal going into Dublin, you know, Dave, you go down to Walsh, they have to start again. Even if they have a panel there, they have to start all over. Whereas the guy that's in already, it has a good head start. There's no doubt about that. Like, I can't wait for the county thing to start, because I think we really have. I believe we could have a fantastic year.
Right, look at Loughrea and Gart, Cafetagan and Crowell are going to be two huge games in the Larkins group there. Quick look at Senior B Group 1. Ormore Mary and Mike Cullen leading the way. Athenry, Killadima coming hard after them.
Yeah, I suppose the surprise team, Sean, if you want to call it surprise, maybe not to them, but around the county, is Mike Cullen. Like, Mike Cullen beating Athenry. Like, that was on the Saturday. I met a couple of Athenryers on the Sunday. They were saying, how can this happen? I said, it can happen because they're putting the work in. That can happen. That doesn't mean Athenry are bad, but it means Mike Cullen has improved a ton. They're top at they're 4 points after 2 games, and like, they'll be very happy where they are. And like, they're playing, was it Teenie Abbott and Iri now, who aren't going well. Probably will improve, have started to improve, but they'll be expecting to win that game as well, you know. And like, the other one there you're talking about, what sort of B team? What sort of B team is there, Sean, you're on about?
You have Baha and Athenry, you have Ormore Mary against Killadima Leitrim, and you have Mike Cullen against Tina Abdinari in Group 1. Yeah,
well, Baha and Athenry, you'd expect Athenry to win that now. Baha in transition, they're kind of, you know, maybe kind of some of them are getting very, very mature. Now, they have good, very young lads coming, but they're very, very young. You know, they are very young, so it takes a while to come through, you know, at that level. So I'd expect that wouldn't win that one, but sure, they're great warriors. Or more, Killadima Leitrim, Sean, have lovely hurlers, very, very nice, nice forwards, not that physical. Or more are very strong, have been playing kind of without a few injuries. St. Kilbacon, you know, it'll be a tight encounter. Maybe or more, just maybe. Killadima Leitrim have very good hurlers, give themselves a mount to do against Athenry, and just nearly got up to them, but just, you know, left themselves too much to do, you know.
Group 2 then, Haskafona against Liam Mellows, Mully against Ardrahan. This is a group that's panning out in a certain way, but Portumna seem to be coming nicely again, don't they? Like,
yeah, well, I saw Haskafona against Portumna, and Portumna won well that day in Ballinasloe. No, they're playing Liam Mellows.
Pierce's this weekend, of course, yeah.
Yeah, well, Haskafona are playing Liam Mellows, and Mellows, you know, maybe kind of changing the guard a bit. I thought they were unlucky last year to go down to be, I think, to be just a bit too strong for Haskafona. Like, Haskafona, you know, are dependent on the 2 men in Blaine and 1 or 2 more, like, but they don't just seem to have the kind of overall strength of the other team. Parry Pearce and Portumna, it'll be a tough one. Pearce are hard to beat, you know, they're dour, they're tough, always put up a good fight, but Portumna are going very well, and they'll be disappointed, Sean. Portumna will be disappointed if they don't get over Parry Pearce after getting a nice win over Ardrahan the last day in Gart.
Before Darren has a quick look at the intermediates, the one thing we'd like to applaud this weekend, and we chatted to Claude Gagan earlier in the week, Darren, and of course you were heavily involved in the Camogie ladies football, but that triple decker in Kenny Park and Athenry on Sunday, where there's 2 senior hurling games either side of the senior camogie game, and I know there's a poignancy around the senior camogie game with the loss of Kate Moran this year. It's the repeat meeting of the 2 teams that played on that fateful evening, but it's lovely to see that initiative, isn't it?
Oh, and not before time either, Sean.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll all be thinking of Kate Moore and her family in the Danes. No get away from that. But as to talk about integration and combining the 4 codes of Gaelic games all in 1, 2, and everybody's voted for it. But of course, there's a lot of steps to go as well. And this is something that has happened in other counties and should have happened in Galway before now. But at least now it's happening. And as you mentioned, you spoke to Claude Gagan during the week as well. And good work with Brian Griffin and the Camogie team too, to make the game happen. And especially for the 2 clubs, because what I like about it, in the middle middle of the triple header is that if you're going to support Athenry, the 2 games are together. If you're going to support Ardrahan, the 2 games are together. So nobody's compelled to stay for the 3 games. Obviously, stay for the 3 games if we do get good weather. And I know that's shaky at the moment. But going back to the question that you're asking, look, these women put in so much work into the games, so they deserve their chance to be playing in the big county fields. In fairness, Galway GAA do make them available to them when they are available too, but they should be part of it, especially now in this split season era that we're living in. And another thing that stood out this year is how overshadowed the women's games are getting from the men's, which was understandable. That was going to happen in year 1 before people teased that together. But for those going to Athenry on Sunday, you're going to see a good game of camogie. Like Athenry there, the win against Cropwell last week. Ardran will be disappointed with their opening 2 results. They're missing a few players, but I see many Ardran teams written up before. They love to remind me down there, Darren, too, how many times I've written them off, Sean, and they come back and win county titles as well. A very, very important game for themselves. So it'll be a good competitive game. It's not just a game that's in there as a filler for, let's look after the camogie. This is going to be quality match, and one of many quality camogie games this weekend, but an opportunity for many hurling fans in the county to see 2 good camogie teams go at it. Yeah, we had to go. Look at the intermediate championship, and I have to mention something. I got a very irate, it was a football man that was telling me about their team in the intermediate championship, and he said that the intermediate championship in hurling and football, Cyril, is organised with 4 groups of 4, 16 teams, right? But his point to me was that after 2 rounds of the football championship, that 7 out of the 8 quarter-finalists were known. And of course I compounded then by saying that, well, in the hurling, after 2 rounds of it, 4 out of the 8 are known, right? And his point to me was that if you're an intermediate club, like 2 to 3 games championship is not enough. And this is probably something that's going to raise its head going forward, because if you're going to 16 team championships, it could be the way that your senior championship could be organised next year. I know there could be difference in the formatting of the way you play the second round games in particular, where you might be able, instead of going with the set sequence, do you ensure that you keep the group alive? But it is something that's to be looked at. And as we look at the intermediate championship this weekend, 4 of the 8 teams are known as we head down the last road.
Yeah, Sean, he's dead right. It's a very good point and a very valid point with the intermediate. And the same thing could happen senior if it's 4-4s, if they're not careful, because what are you going to get? Maybe 2 meaningful games in the year. That could happen, and you have to be very careful. Like, it's a very valid point. But to be fair, like to Claude and the boys in there, like in Damon McGrath, they're new in and they're doing a good job. I'd say they'll have a look. Like they'll see what's happening and they'll be able to rectify that next year, to make sure. To me now, the senior thing, like you're getting your 5 games, which is fantastic because you're training all year. But if you're only getting 2 meaningful games, definitely that's not going to promote hurling or football. It's the wrong way. But they will, Sean, and they get a look at it. I think they'll rectify it and just make sure that you'll be getting more games. Both intermediate, like the senior this year is 5, but the intermediates, like they deserve it too. But next year, if it's 4-4s, the same thing could happen to senior if there's only 2 qualifying over 4. So I'd say they'll have a look at it. It's at least it's flagged itself now, and they're capable of looking at it. But
I think the reality is, lads, is the 4 groups of 4 is the way it's going to be, or a double knockout system. Sir, just to make a point there as well, taking the split season into account, how important is it now for county boards to get their league competitions proper? Because at the end of the day, the biggest issue I find meaningful matches, because look, we know we're not going to see a situation of more than 2 or 3 meaningful championship matches, but if club players, especially when the inter-county season is on, is getting their guaranteed games every couple of weeks, can that help an awful lot for numbers and keep an interest in the game? It mightn't stop some people going stateside or going abroad for a summer, but I feel myself that's the key thing, is often leagues are kind of ran off very, very quickly. There's nothing for so long, and they were all jumping back in September, which at the end of the day is going to be very, very hard to keep the interest of young players.
Yeah, well, I suppose
that's another big topic now. Let's
Sean referred to there is to make it meaningful. Like how do you make it count? You know what I mean? In some counties, might be able to do it now, but some counties have the league. If you finished in the league final or semi-finals, you qualify into kind of a championship quarterfinal. But that's another thing. But that's when we were talking about the split season. That another big thing on the PR side. To me, one of the biggest things is the kids. If you have a Galway football team in All-Ireland final in September, or a Galway hurling team in All-Ireland final in September, the kids are back at school. There's a big build-up. There's flags. There's euphoria. There's buses trying to get to Crow Park. And if the team happens to win, they come around to the school. And if you have a nice principal, you're going to get a day or a half day off. That's a great PR down the road. That's completely forgotten about. Like now, the finals are on, and the kids, unless you're like, there's no build up. We're losing all that. I just have a feel that, like, the powers in Crow Park are doing a lot of work, but I don't know where they've gone away from the grassroots audience. They want to be very careful. It's fine above in Croke Park saying we have 80,000 or 60,000. They're not, I'm not worried about them. But at the underneath level, that's what you have to have coming through. And we have really cut off a terrible lot of kind of say popular opinion, that like young fellas looking for their heroes. But their heroes are kind of nearly hidden now because you don't see them. Like the school thing was very, very big in my time in Galway and the same in Dublin. It was unreal. But now that's gone. And that, to me, that's a big loss. It's a big PR loss.
Right, Darren, quick look at the Intermediate Championship. It said Group 1, Turlockmore are through, but the real catch here is Cylon or Turlockmore. If there's a result in that game, Ballinderreen go out of the Intermediate Championship. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, but it's a very important point that Ballinderreen got coming back from behind against Cylon the last day too. Now, the reality for Cylon, it's in their own hands. You know, they've gone and take on, which is Turlockmore's second team as well, and Cylon have to feel they're going to be able to compete in that. There's very little in scoring difference.
And Cylon now are one of the rated teams as well, in fairness.
But there's very little in scoring difference. Like if Cylon come off 1 point short, and Ballinderreen do get the job against on Spiddale, which there's an 8-point swing they'll have to make, but which it's a possibility. But Cylon, you would feel, might be able to just get over the line there as well. Ballinderreen should not have let themselves get in that position, Sean.
Group 2, I suppose a similar scenario here. Carnmore are looking for a leg out here. Crowell, another second team, have qualified. They play Millick Aircourt. Carnmore against Kilbacon. Carnmore will want to beat Kilbacon well and hope to get a result in the first one. Yeah,
Carnmore paying for their defeat the first day against Crowell, but we can't take away from Crowell's performance that day too. I saw them against Millick Aircourt in the second round. They're absolutely fantastic, but Millick Aircourt didn't show exactly what they could do getting back into the game, and actually were ahead in the closing stretch after being well out of the contest. Millick Aircourt could be very consistent, but again, you just know if they're zoned in, Damien Howe's over them there, he'll have them tuned in as well. Again, if they get their result, what Carnmore do doesn't matter. And again, I suppose it just goes to show that these groups of four, they're like cup matches every day. If you get off to a bad start, you're playing catch up.
Well, in a group of 4, 3 games, there is no room for error. That's the thing. Going forward, Group 3 is sorted, as we know. Abbey-Knockmoy and Killimer are out. The 2 games there, Kiltormer against Castlegar, Killimer against Abbey-Knockmoy. And in Group 4, then probably the one where the 3 out of the 4 teams are alive, and if Down can do something against Kinvara in their match. Clarenbridge against Rahon Newcastle. Rahon Newcastle top of the group with 4 points under Darren Shaughnessy, as we know. Kinvara, without Conor Whelan now, did very well the last day out. They've got 2 points on the board, and Clarenbridge, with that plethora of young lads coming through, of 2 points. And Down will try to do something in the last game, but this group goes to the wire to some degree.
Yeah, I think Clarenbridge against Rahon Newcastle is the game of the week in regards to the importance of it. And obviously, you just touched on there, Clarenbridge need to get a result and probably need to win the game by 7 or 8 points, Sean, to definitely book their spot in. While Kinvara, without Conor Whelan, Anna Down will compete. They're never easily beaten as well. Their scoring difference is only -11 despite the 2 defeats. They won't let Kinvara have it all their own way, but I think Anna Down are fighting the relegation trapdoor at this stage there now as well. But if they pick up a result head to head, might work their way. But Clarenbridge Rahon, 5:15 Saturday in Carnmore is probably the pick of the games this weekend.
And of course, we know the Galway GAA streaming games, but stay tuned to Galway Bay FM as well, because there'll be a lot of games streamed over the weekend as well on Galway Bay FM's coverage. Yeah,
we'll be at the Sharon streaming games this weekend. I'm in Duggan Park on Saturday, and you were there, and Niall and Sir Donnan on Sunday, and delighted, of course, being a Ballinasloe man to see Ballinasloe get their games. But I think I'd pick up the win this weekend, Sean, because I'm in Pearse Stadium for the double header, and I'm looking forward, as we mentioned earlier on, how Killimer Daly approached the Turlockmore game at 1:45. But you've Castlegar as well, and as Cyril touched on earlier on, have never let Thomas's have it all their own way. Indeed, if they'd beaten St Thomas's back in 2018, we might be talking about this drive for 5 at the moment as well. And there was only 2 points between them last time they met. Look, St Thomas's is getting stronger. They're bringing a couple more players back, I think, into the squad as well. Be hard to see Castlegar do that, but I'm looking forward to Turlockmore and Killimer Daly, not just because you're here beside me, Sean.
Well, they're looking forward to it. As we said, round 3, this is where it's going to happen. We won't put any pressure at all on you, Farrell. We won't ask you how you're going to do in your game. But listen, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, but there's a game there, Sean, in Saturday in Duggan Park, Cappy and Crockwell.
Yeah,
very, very interesting game. Cappy going very well. Crockwell kind of stuck with a few injuries. Like, it's a game like Crockwell probably have to win. Just an interesting one. And there's another one there in Kinney Park, Mullion Ardrahan, down in the B. Again, like, both of them were beaten the last day. It's an important game. Both good championship teams. Ardrahan have a very young team. Mullion will be more seasoned, but I'm looking for, like, they're going to be good matches. They're nearly be forgotten about, but they won't be forgotten by Mullion and Ardrahan, if you know what I mean.
Cyril, as always, thanks for joining us on the Over the Line Extra. Thanks to Darren, the new man, Des, in today for the your championship debut, I think we will call it.
Well, I'm here for the 25th, Joe. I'll come back for the 50th, if that's all right.
If we survive that long. Listen, we'll be back next week, 12:30 on Galway Bay FM's Over the Line Podcast Extra Special. Join us then, and we look forward to seeing you over the week.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.